That's my addition to our little intro track. Welcome to the Angry Sun Zone. As usual, I'm Alex.
I'm Santo.
And I'm Sean.
And today we've got an episode focused on one of our favorite game series. We've all played it too much. We've all spent far too many turns on this game. And there's always one more turn waiting for you. We're talking about Civilization today.
Hell yeah, we are. Sid Meier's Civilization, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes, as well as the few spin-offs, such as the first Civilization game that I played, which was actually Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri, which is a cool entry in the series that I'm just going to start talking about right away.
Sounds good.
Yeah, because it was the first one that I played. It's a lot closer to, I believe, Civ 2, because it was released between Civilization 2 and 3. But it was kind of cool because it had some mechanics that have not really been seen in the series since, without extensive modding. But a brief breakdown of what is Civilization, for those of you who don't know. So Civilization is what is termed a 4X game. It's actually essentially the genre-defining series. Many of the conventions of the 4X genre were basically invented by Civilization, the early games in particular. And it stands for expand, explore, exterminate, and exploit. And basically, the concept of 4X games in general is that you have a sort of civilization or empire or whatever you want to call it, and you having fun with the dog there, Sean?
Yeah, she's licking my knee and it tickles.
Oh man, that's an outtake, or is it? Anyway, yeah. So basically, you have an empire or civilization. You start typically with one city, maybe a unit or two, and then you can found new cities. That's the explore part of it. Exploring the map and founding new cities, build units. You can basically extract resources from the environment. And then, so that's the explore, expand, exploit. And then you can crush your enemies with the units you build. That's often a win condition, though not the only one. Many 4X games have alternate win conditions, such as advancing along the tech tree to basically complete a major project, or diplomatic victories, or in some of the later Civilization games, there is a cultural victory. And
a science victory?
Yeah, the science victory is the tech tree victory.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Well, in Civ specifically, non-Alpha Centauri Civ games, it's launching into space.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny. So in Civilization, the science victory in Civilization is launching a rocket to Alpha Centauri, and then they made a game, Alpha Centauri, where the rocket that was sent to Alpha Centauri basically blew up and stranded various people, various groups from the original settlers.
So remember, whenever you start a game in Alpha Centauri, you are canonically the victor of a Civ game that previously happened.
Yep.
They came up with, I guess, like a sequel or a spiritual sequel in some way to that in the Civ series. And the name of it is just on the tip of my tongue.
Beyond Earth?
Yes. Civilization Beyond Earth. Not quite the same as Alpha Centauri, from what I've heard. It doesn't feel truly like the spiritual successor.
From what I heard about Beyond Earth, it was basically just like a full conversion mod for Civ 5. It was the same thing, but in space. Whereas Alpha Centauri, I believe, was
different.
A fair amount different. I've never played Alpha Centauri myself.
Yeah, so the biggest... Okay, so there's a few differences with Alpha Centauri. One of the biggest differences in terms of the overall strategy is that there is I would say that the NPC... So in Civ, there are some barbarians and barbarian towns. They're pretty much a distraction. They're not a major challenge, really. They slow down your expansion slightly, but they don't really do much other than that.
They keep you honest.
Yeah.
I've seen games where somebody has lost to a barbarian.
Oh man.
To get there requires you to truly extend your resources and put yourself in a vulnerable position. So if you're making those kinds of maneuvers, there is truly a risk factor to it that isn't just, the other players are not paying attention.
To be fair, this happened to somebody who was extremely new to the game.
Yeah.
So.
So but in Alpha Centauri, there's actually they had these like psychic brainworms that spawn on the map, and there's like sort of like hives that spawn them, and they're actually a major challenge, especially because I believe the combat system in Alpha Centauri is a bit mixed, because there is psychic damage that is separate from physical damage, basically, and you have different stats for it, I believe, and so that makes those psychic units actually fairly powerful sometimes, and it really, I would say, you're spending a lot more effort just navigating a hostile environment with your expansion early game in Alpha Centauri. One of the other cool things about Alpha Centauri is that it has a unit builder. You can create your own vehicles and aircraft and stuff like that. It's really cool. It's a huge time sink. But it's also just a really cool thing to do. And then also, especially with I think this was in the expansion, but Alpha Centauri also has water cities, which is kind of a cool thing to have in the game. And I think that there's unit experience in it, which isn't in all Civ games, but it is in the later ones.
Yeah.
Although, it's been in like the past, since 4, I guess.
Since 3.
Really? Oh, then I guess, the unit promotion started in...
Well, in terms of like, do you mean like you can choose different like skills for your units and stuff?
No. You know what? I don't remember exactly how it works, to be honest.
Because I know in Civ 3 at least, you leveled up and then your units just, got stronger. Whereas 4 onwards, you got to choose like different abilities when you promoted.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just flipping through some notes on Civ. Wow, they've got... people also had some high notes about the storyline. What was your thoughts on the storyline, Alex?
The storyline in Alpha Centauri?
Yeah.
The writing in Alpha Centauri was really cool, actually, because they have... it's obviously sci-fi themed, and all of the factions are fairly different. And so you've got... Like, there's a faction that essentially is... They're like, we're just going to be a human hive mind. We're gonna turn humans into the Zerg, right? That's like one faction's whole deal, right? You got like a faction that's like utopian space hippies, right? We're just gonna solve everything with technology and love. You've got like a faction that's like sort of like bioengineering. They're just gonna bioengineer the shit out of everything. So they had a really cool lore about the different factions, and some of the different features of the factions were sort of interesting. So
cool.
It was cool.
That sounds like a great introduction to the Civ series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then other than that, like a lot of the core mechanics are really quite similar. I mean, you're building units and exploring the map, you're founding new cities, and building improvements using your workers on the tiles and stuff, and then using the various city controls to kind of like place your resources, place your population on different resource tiles to get different types of resources like money or minerals or whatever. I can't remember. There's definitely food, money, and like production.
Yeah. the staples.
Yeah, the staple kind of resources in Civ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that's probably most of the.
Most of the Centauri, yeah. Just to get a feel for the room, did anybody here play Civ 1 or 2? Because I haven't.
I think I might have played a tiny bit of Civ 2, but not. For the most part, actually, maybe I didn't. I might be just getting mixed up.
I believe that the only exposure I've had is actually watching someone else play.
Yeah, I've definitely seen people play the original Civ, but never played it myself.
I started with Civ 4, I believe, was the first one that I played. I'm not sure if I played Civ 3. I don't think I have.
I started with Civ 3, and I got Civ 3 through the Scholastic book program at school.
Nice.
Because
cool.
they would occasionally have a couple video games in there, so I would circle that and give it to my parents and be like, look, it's education. And so it's just like the only time, other than birthdays and Christmas, the only time I could ever get them to get me games. So yeah, that was my introduction. But as you can imagine, considering I got through the Scholastic book program, I was too young and stupid to be playing that game. I had no fucking idea what I was doing. I didn't. I just did not. I just like to build cities and just mess around with it. I didn't really know the mechanics. Like, I didn't know that your cities wouldn't go past a certain population if you didn't have fresh water, for example.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
I had no clue.
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing some Civ 3 with you, and even then, it's funny because I'm not sure if some of those mechanics I was even aware of at the time either.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's a lot of depth to the Civilization games, and yeah, if you're playing them at like 12 years old, you're going to be kind of lost.
Especially if you don't read the manual, because that was back when for games like that, you had to read the manual.
For sure. And it's interesting because I think that would have come out around a time too when the manual was pretty much the only alternative other than talking to your friends, in terms of like there wouldn't be too many online resources for games like that I remember being aware of at the time.
I mean, yeah, you could certainly like try to look stuff up, but it's not like now where every game has its own wiki where you just have all the information available. You have to rely on random people posting on awesome HTML only websites.
Yeah.
About your favorite games.
I actually remember there being a website, the website that I learned about Civ on. The guide came in a text format, so I actually went onto a website and downloaded a text file in order to learn more about this game, and that was how I started getting better at the time. So that's an interesting memory.
Yeah. Well, one of the coolest things that I thought about Civ 3 was like I played a fair amount of just random matches against the AI and constantly lost because I didn't know what I was doing. But they also had a couple different scenarios which had like their own unique units and unique resources that you could collect, and that was really cool. Like I played the Japan scenario a ton because one of the factions that you could choose there, their flag was a Triforce.
Awesome.
So I was just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna play the Tojo clan every time because of the Triforce people. So yeah, Civ 3 was definitely an introduction, but yeah, Civ 4 though is where I think all of us definitely cut our teeth.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Civ 4 was, I think, for the style of how the game functioned before the major changes in Civ 5. Civ 4 was basically the pinnacle of the series, especially once the expansions kind of fleshed out a few more things. It was very, very well made.
Especially with the introduction of, was it Leonard Nimoy?
Yeah.
Yeah. I still remember some of his quotes in my head.
Every time he unlocked a unlocked a new technology on the tech tree, Leonard Nimoy would just narrate some historical quote.
Yeah.
Catch a fish and you will feed a man for a day. Teach a man to fish and you will feed him for a lifetime.
And then the
fishing,
new text that they introduced in the expansion, it was actually Sid Meier who read the descriptions for those.
Oh yeah.
So that was pretty cool. But I certainly had my strategies for the different Civ games definitely like changed between them. My go-to strategy in Civ 4 was I generally played Catherine, and I generally played as Ethiopia and just like turned on the mix and match leader in Civ, because the Civ has the unique building, unique units of that Civ, but the leader has a couple different leader traits that can pretty drastically impact the game. So with Catherine, she had creative, which was you get extra culture and extra production towards one or two different culture buildings, I think. And culture is what makes your borders expand.
Yeah.
She was imperialistic, which meant you had double production on settlers, as well as one other bonus that I forget. And Ethiopia had the Stele, which replaced the monument, which was the first culture building, which gave your city plus 25% extra culture. So I was all about that expansion in Civ 4. I just wanted to take up as much of the map as possible, never enable open borders with anybody, and just try and put a line in the sand throughout whatever landmass I was on, and say this is my territory, you cannot pass there, and I'm going to slowly take all the territory behind me.
Yeah, as I recall, the way the happiness game mechanic worked in Civ 4, it made that a dominant strategy.
Well, it made that if you didn't understand how it worked, which I didn't for a little bit, it could be a really big problem, because if you expand too much, the game has checks and balances for that, to where you need more. If you have too much population, you need more luxury resources and entertainment buildings to keep your population happy and working. And if you expand too much, every new city that you make costs you more gold and upkeep, especially as they get farther and farther away from your capital, without other buildings and whatever that you get later on. So you definitely can't expand too fast too quickly, but that never stopped me from trying.
They tried to make it less of the main strategy to win games in Civ 5, especially. They changed the upkeep to be substantially more punishing.
Oh yeah.
Whether that was a good change or a bad change, I mean, it definitely changes the way the game is played.
Some of those core mechanics really seem to have a pull on the kind of the more that you research Civ, you'd find that certain gameplay styles are either promoted as being effective to give you an edge versus leading you kind of astray. And that was one of the things, is that the change between Civ 4 and Civ 5 definitely made me appreciate the differences, but also rethink the way that I was going about growing my cities. Because for me, there was a period where I really tried to not make mistakes when it came to developing my cities and having, for example, happiness or upkeep or any of those things be an issue. But sometimes I found that obsessing over making the cities run smoothly did not necessarily lead to victory when the other players, such as yourselves, were doing strategies that I also really needed to pay attention to. And with all my bandwidth spent on trying to make my cities work, I could quickly find myself under the thumb of somebody's military might.
Yeah, I think that's always been something about the Civ series, is that there's a lot of micro you can do on managing your cities, how the population is working your tiles, and what improvements you're building where. But at the end of the day, those benefits are marginal compared to just having more cities, or just having having conquered better terrain in the first place.
Yeah, just like using what production you get every turn in a smart way to, you can definitely lose games where you invest in military and then do not have a good war with that military. So
yeah, and
it's all about balance.
Yeah, and it kind of depends too on the other civilizations around you. Like you say, if you kind of go in on military and then lose a war because you just had a bad war against your neighbor, you're sort of hooped, because building units is quite expensive, because it prevents you from building the buildings that are going to give you economic advantages late game, even mid game, and then it also prevents you from building settlers and other exploratory units that allow you to expand. So,
and like everything, costs that money.
Yeah,
units have an upkeep, so you just having a large standing army, like that's a investment they have to make.
Yeah, and it's an investment that doesn't pay off if that army doesn't capture you cities.
Or defend you from other people.
Defend you, or do something, right?
Yeah.
What was interesting related to that is I felt that with each of the civs and leaders that you could pick, there was kind of like a defining statement behind them, victory through military strength, and, whatever the flavor of the day is. Maybe they're really good in the forests and they have, and on certain terrain. And being able to figure out what the leader that you were picking, what their victory kind of strategy or statement was, and then actually applying that to the game could make things a lot easier, actually, once you understand that, because instead of needing to think about all these other things that you're doing just to run your empire, you go, I know where my strengths are going to be. Let me push in those ways as I'm making everything else work.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, that's one of the things, like when we're talking about Civ 4 and Santa's strategy of basically going all in on growth, that, that's a proper strategy. That is an overarching, style of managing your civilization to gain an advantage in the game. Mm-hmm. And in Civ 4, I would say that was really where a lot of the value is going to be had. Because in Civ 4, strategy was really more important. One of the things in Civ 4, as far as the military is concerned, is that units could be stacked on top of each other.
Yes. The death tower.
Yeah. And what that means, though, is that in terms of how a military conflict in Civ 4 would go, at the end of the day, a lot of it came down to how many units do you have? And are they better units than your opponent has? And they'll just go and kind of fight all at once, and you'll see the outcome pretty quickly.
Yeah, that could get even more complicated with counter units, because when you're on offense, you don't choose the defending unit you're attacking. If you're attacking another stack, the defending unit is chosen by whatever defending unit is going to have the best strength against your attacking unit.
Yeah.
So it led to these situations where big towers of units normally wouldn't really clash against each other on just walking around on the battlefield. It was more these gigantic tides of units smacking into gigantic bastions at cities. Mm-hmm. It ended up concentrating the fight for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but what that means is that tactics was really not as important. The decisions that won you your military engagements in Civ 4 were, how many units did you actually build? What type did you build? And where and which part of your empire are they in? Right? In terms of a tactical, I'm gonna arrange these units in such a way to protect these units and do that kind of thing. That wasn't really much of a part of it. And then in Civ 5, they made a drastic change where they shifted from a square tile-based grid to a hex tile-based grid. And at the same time, they implemented 1 unit per tile, more or less. I think you can maybe get a worker and a military unit.
You could have a military and a non-military unit on the same.
Yeah. But for the most part, 1 unit per tile, which they also retained into Civilization 6. and it dramatically changed combat. I think, is it better or worse? I mean, it definitely makes the combat more engaging, but it also, I find, it slows the game down a bit.
Yes.
And so it's a bit of an interesting trade-off they made with Civ 5 there, where the combat is now more interesting on a tactical level. Some of the choices you make in unit positioning relative to your other units and relative to the opponent's units actually matter, especially because there's a lot more focus on like ranged attacks.
Yeah, like I don't even think there were ranged attacks in Civ 4.
I think there was, but it just didn't really it didn't matter. It didn't really matter that much. I think there was like a couple units that could go 2 spaces. But like maybe the catapult.
Well, those need to be next to the city. But I mean, they could attack without retaliation, sure, but they still only had like 1 tile range.
Well, maybe that's all it was.
In Civ 5,
maybe I'm thinking of just the attacking without retaliation. Then.
Yeah.
But yeah, ranged considerations weren't really a major thing to even think about.
Until you get nukes.
Oh, well, that's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, I mean, it's interesting that difference. I don't know. I still have mixed feelings about it because I do like we were playing Civ 6 a while back, the 3 of us actually, and it was going pretty smoothly, and then me and Sean got into a war because he stole my settler.
Yep.
And I immediately declared I mean, technically you declared war by stealing the settler.
I started that. And you finished it.
And I immediately ramped up an immense naval armada. And basically, the thing is, it was fun. It's very engaging. But at the same time, it slowed the game way down.
Yeah, like it was. Yeah, and me being the other human player in that game, I would finish my turn in like 45 seconds, and then just sit there for like 5 to 10 minutes for each of you guys just to like figure out your turns. And it was
because we had so
much to do on each individual turn.
Yeah, because we had so many military engagements happening. That, it would take us a couple minutes each.
I have a comment on that, and this is coming from someone who definitely takes his fair share of time to complete the turns. I can sometimes experience analysis paralysis, which makes making these important decisions take longer rather than shorter. And there's been quite a few times where I've played a strategy game, and the turns are timed. And I was reading about this mechanic, and I actually haven't played a game yet that has it. I know there's a few 4X games out there that use this, and it'd be interesting to see it in Civ. Would be the turn timer as a resource. So basically, certain mechanics are actually tied into how much time you're going to get in your turn, and it's split down the middle between your economic actions, which have a timer, versus your military ones, and it's kind of like your orders.
That would be an interesting way to handle a turn timer, especially in a game like Civ, where your turn timer at the first few turns, your turn timer needs to be pretty short because you only have a few units. Whereas endgame Civilization, the turns are just going to take a long time, no matter what.
Yeah.
Because your empire is so big by that point. But having the turn timer be some sort of resource that's essentially tied to how much economic production you have going on, or how many units you have, could actually maybe make for a turn timer that scales to how much time you actually should need given what you have going on.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting idea for a turn timer, actually.
And this lens from, I think there's a few games, there's one game that did this that really rung this idea up, was that they actually had orders. And these orders consisted of letters, and you would inscribe basically on the letters what you wanted your empire to do, and then these letters would go by horseback out of your capital towards the varying places that you needed your orders to go to. Now, a very skilled commander would wait to see these horses and fucking snipe them off so that the rest of your orders never got committed to. And to me, that seemed like a really cool...
Wait, what? Do you know what game this was?
Yeah, that sounds really cool.
I'm going to come back to it. It's somewhere in my my history, and it really caught me as a mechanic that made me go, whoa, that's actually different.
Yeah, because that also... That was a real military strategy back when the orders had to be delivered.
Yeah, it
Right.
might have been Universia Europalis, but I'm not sure.
Europa Universalis.
That one! Yes!
You know
yes,
what?
it
That
could
totally
be.
seems like the game series that would have a mechanic like that.
Yeah, and definitely a standout mechanic. Would be interesting to maybe perhaps see in a Civ game or something along the lines of those resources, because, yeah, let me tell you, having a time constraint as someone who takes a lot of time is actually very helpful. It might be a little bit of a stressful experience, but it makes me a better player, I find, for sure.
Yeah.
So
So long as the term timer is not aggressively short.
yes, I'm thinking of that one Warframe game, Wargroove game that we had.
Yeah,
where...
we played a Wargroove match, the three of us, on a custom map that I made, and I set 1 minute turn timers, which is not enough time.
Aggressive indeed. In the middle of doing something essential, and whoops, ran out of time.
Yeah, it's just like throughout the game, I'm like, is Sean just like banking up resources on purpose, or is he just running out of time?
You know what was interesting is I was kind of prioritizing making moves for most turns, and then like you were saying, I'd switch back to buying. Like I could really only focus on and do one effectively, and so for that strategy, I realized, well, I really should try and focus on just doing one of these things effectively. What is the core locus of each turn? Yeah.
I gotta say though, the turn timers made it extremely satisfying to figure out the like sedge puzzles. Just like, okay, I can assassinate this guy here, then move over here, and attack this person here. To try and like, how do I kill my opponent's commander in 1 minute?
Nice. Nice.
That's pretty cool. Speaking of, different commanders, I know, Alex, one of the commanders that you played a fair amount in Civ 4, I remember, was Darius the First. I don't remember what one of his abilities was, but his other one was Financial, which was one of the best abilities in the game. Just getting extra money.
Whenever
you would get extra money if the tiles you were working had a certain amount of money already.
Yeah.
And stacking money in Civ 4 especially was so good.
Oh, especially because so money in general, the best way to get money, and the way I prefer, is basically fishing, like coastal towns. When you work ocean tiles, every ocean tile gives you money. Ocean tiles that have resources on them typically give you a lot of money. And it's just, I've always found that having a high income from actual tiles is such a huge help in a Civ game, because it gives you versatility. If you are just trying to focus on building out your economic base, you can use money to buy the buildings that you need, especially in young cities. Especially in the mid-game, when you're settling a new city, kind of in the mid-game, it is a challenge to get it up to viable size and viable production output fast. And the best way to do that is to just spend money buying improved buildings for that city to make it grow faster. And that's one of the things I love about just like having a high income, is that you can actually do that effectively. And then also, if you get into a military engagement, you can just buy units. It's expensive, but in my mind, having a high gold income in Civ it's the most versatile resource you can get, and you can stockpile it too. So I would much rather have a large treasury than a standing army, because I can just buy the army whenever I want. It's tough, but that's what I did in that game against Sean.
Army on demand.
I bought a bunch of, because I had a large number of coastal towns, and then Sean went and tried to take one of my settlers that was going to found another coastal town, and then I just flooded a navy out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, indeed. It was shocking. I was like, how is he doing this? Shortly followed by, oh my god, I'm going to die.
and the answer was that my strategy in that game was actually very heavily focused on establishing coastal cities with high gold income, which I was using to buy buildings for those cities to grow them faster, and then buying military when I needed a military instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like everything in Civ, like, there is counterplay to that, to where coastal cities will generally, like, coastals generally don't have production, or very little, unless they have a resource on them. So, you know, you can't just only take the coast and expect it to do well, because until you get, you know, that stockpile of gold to start buying buildings, if the other resources you have on land aren't giving you production, then you could just, like, never be able to actually build anything.
Yeah, I typically focus on establishing my coastal towns around the improved resources.
Yeah.
Because if you do a coastal town without any actual improvements on the ocean, it is not that effective. Sometimes I'll do it and then regret it. Like, I think actually there was a different game where I set up a settler out and sent him out to this remote island, and it was literally, the island was maybe like 4 tiles of land just in the middle of the ocean. And it was actually really frustrating, because there were a few resources around it, but none of them were food generating resources. And so that city, although its potential as a wealth generator was through the roof, it took me so long to grow the city, because it had no improved food. It had no food improvements whatsoever.
Yeah.
Not a single food resource.
Yeah.
And it was so frustrating, because if that city was operating at full capacity, it probably would have made more gold than the rest of my empire, than the entire rest of my empire. But it just wasn't really working.
Yeah, because, like...
Sounds like you chose the needs of the empire over the needs of the population, and reap the rewards.
Yeah. You gotta be careful with that, because, like, you need your citizens to be working efficiently, because the citizens, they take up food. So if you just have a bunch of citizens working, you know, a bunch of planes that give 2 food, well, each citizen takes up 2 food, so you're not netting anything.
Right, yeah. So the other things with Darius there were, so +1 on square, so extra gold on high gold production squares, double production speed for a bank, but also the civic upkeep is reduced 50%, which is huge. And then also double production speed for the lighthouse, factory, and courthouse.
Oh, god damn it, of course.
Of which the lighthouse is the most key, especially for my playstyle, because a lighthouse gives you additional food output on ocean tiles. Building a lighthouse is essential for a coastal city. In Civ. It should be probably the first building you build once it's unlocked at every coastal city. Maybe a granary, but even then, it's one of the first 2 buildings you want to build when you can.
Mm-hmm. And like that financial though is so great, because like it's something that goes throughout the entire game. Yeah. Because like, as much as I loved like the double production speed on settlers, like at a certain point, you're not settling any more cities in a Civ game.
Yeah, and late game, even if you are settling, even like maybe mid game, if you're still settling cities mid game, the double production speed isn't that necessary, because settlers are a unit that can be produced somewhat fast. Although I think some of the more recent games scale the production costs of settlers for that very reason.
Yes.
So that they're more expensive late game. But even then, if you've got a dozen cities, you're bound to have at least one of them that has such high production output you can produce settlers quickly.
Yeah.
The one thing that I've felt is that was one of the areas in terms of balancing your cities. Like, basically, I feel like a Civ game is like spinning many plates.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And it was interesting because, you know, even if there were no turn timers, I always felt as though the outcome of my game could be directly related back to the plates that I was aware that I was spinning, the plates that I wasn't aware that I was spinning, and the plates that were flying off, crashing, and destroying my intended strategy.
Speaking of that, so we've talked a bit about the differences between Civ 4 and Civ 5 in that Civ 5 introduced a dramatically different combat system and a hex grid. But Civ 6 is actually... so continuing the tradition of getting more micro, I would say that in Civ 4 to Civ 5, there was a big shift on trying to make the combat system a lot more tactical. And then with Civ 6, they focused a bit more on the cities and the building system in those cities. In that, in Civ 6, there are many buildings in Civ 6 that actually need to be built in what are called districts. And a district takes up a tile in your city, like on the map. Now, this is a pretty interesting change, if challenging at times, because there's many cities that will not be able to build out. In fact, you're not going to be able to build every district in every city. You won't. You may not have enough.
There's a hard cap.
Yeah, there's a hard cap on the number of them, and then also they can be fairly expensive. And so you're really focusing each city, and you're taking each city's strengths based on its terrain, its resources, to make that city work for your empire. Now, sometimes that might mean, okay, this city is going to be a financial hub, so you're going to build a financial district. Or I think it's a commerce district, right? And the financial, like the gold generating buildings, like a market and a bank, go in the commerce district. Or you might say, okay, well, no, this is going to be this city, it's got lots of mountains, it's got ores, it's going to be a production city, it's going to be a center of industry, and then there's like an industrial district, which is a dramatically different style of managing buildings, because in the past Civ games, you could build any building in any city without any prerequisites. Or sometimes there would be
like for a couple buildings, like a water mill needs to be next to a river. And stuff like that.
Or like I think there was I think in some they had some buildings that required a building already. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
well, generally there was a progression where if you want to build a university, you need a library.
You need a library to build a university. You need a market to build a bank. I think stuff like that. But by tying buildings to specific tiles in the way that Civ 6 does, it makes planning your city a completely different experience, which is a lot more involved and at the micro level, of even to the point of like choosing, okay, what districts do I want and where do I put them on the map?
It's a change that I really, really like in theory. It's more that just like Civ 6, I got it fairly recently and I have not had the free time to delve into it as much as the other Civ games, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure, yeah. Civ 6, I have not played as much as 5 or 4.
Maybe we should play some later.
No.
I
No.
don't know.
I don't have time.
Yeah.
Right? See?
I love Civilization, but a single game, even on your own, you're basically looking at a full day.
Yeah, like this is the podcast episode that I did the most prep for, because I played half a game of Civ. And that game went... I was playing... It was Civ 6. I was playing as France, and I was playing as... I think Eleanor, whose special ability was like the more great works you had in a building, the more pressure it would put on surrounding cities to like lower their loyalty. So I was going for the art victory and building like a ton of wonders, because I love building wonders in these games.
Oh yeah, and wonders are so great.
And wonders as well in Civ 6 require you to place them on tiles.
Oh, yeah. So, so the strategy in previous games, sometimes, if you got a high production city early, you could literally just build every single wonder in the game in this one city. And because wonders usually have really strong benefits to the city, the whole thing can kind of snowball if you get the right combination of circumstances of like a really, really strong production city. can be kind of gross,
Yeah,
actually.
Yep.
definitely.
But yeah, I found that is impossible in Civ 6 because most wonders are going to, I think probably all of them.
All of them take up a tile.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's much more difficult to monopolize wonders in Civ 6, which maybe is a good thing.
Yeah.
Have you guys played any of the Civ board games? I know we're dipping outside of the video games territory a little bit here, but there's been quite a few.
I've not.
I have not.
I mean, I played. We've definitely played our fair share of 4X style board games, but none Civ specific.
We should come back to this thought.
I think my favorite 4X board games probably Eclipse.
The
ones I've played.
Oh yeah.
That's a great board game, but
I also give it a solid recommend. In fact, if you hear the word 4X and it gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling, and you've got friends who you can actually see, thank you, slow and steady progress towards the end of the pandemic. Definitely take a look for that board game. Just keep in mind, it can take a while.
Yeah.
I think it's about an hour per person.
So it says a half an hour per person. They're lying.
It's double.
yeah, it's more like an hour.
It's
per
double
person.
that when you know how to play.
Bring the pizza, bring the drinks, bring your most sassy leader persona within you, and it's actually fun to play Civ like that too, when you're looking at a leader and you're thinking about how historically they were, how Civ portrays the leader to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would just role play the decisions that I'm making as if I am those leaders, and it felt a lot more fun when I was playing a game, like... I am George Washington. America, America, America.
And that's one of the super fun things about playing against the AI in those games is that, especially in the later games, each separate leader had their own AI traits to them, to where they're like X likely to declare war. They really really like it when you're the same religion as them and stuff like that. And so the individual leader personalities were pretty great. Like Montezuma just being a complete wild card. You never know what he's going to do because he's random every time.
Always going to fly off the handle on me.
pretty much. Or like in Civ 5, each leader has a tendency to do certain things on a scale of 1 to 10. Gandhi has the nuke building stat at 12.
Out of 10.
That's
because of the running joke in the series.
That's a reference to a long running joke in the series that Gandhi is incredibly aggressive and will go to war with you at the drop of a hat.
So it's not necessarily that. He just loves them nukes.
I heard the origin story of this, and you guys may have too, that when they were programming Gandhi a long time ago, they wanted to give him as low aggression as possible. And within the calculation involved, they went so low that they went below 0, and it looped all the way around.
Yeah,
really?
Sid Meier confirmed that wasn't the case.
My mind is blown.
That it's more of a just perception thing, to where Gandhi was good at science, so he could get to nukes usually pretty fast. So usually the first person to get nukes. The text for this person has nukes to back up their words or whatever was the same for everybody. So when Gandhi said shit to you, it's their words are backed up by nukes. That oh shit, Gandhi's getting serious. It was more a perception thing in the first Civ than anything. But then in later Civs, they did programmatically make him nuke happy.
Yeah. They leaned into the joke.
And
as much as I love the idea that there was a buffer underflow on Gandhi that caused him to go to war and be aggressive really easily, it is.
Okay. Let me ask you a very interesting
Unless
question.
Sid Meier's lying to us all.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe he's covering his ass, but let me pose this question. What one world leader would you want to see play a Civ game with other world leaders? Who do you think, in real world?
God.
I mean, Putin would obviously backstab everyone.
That would be very interesting. What would Putin do?
He would pretend to be everyone's friend and then backstab everyone and win. Actually, speaking of, that reminds me. So one of the other things about Civ is that it can be played single player and it can also be played multiplayer. And one of the things I just love about multiplayer Civ is the mind games. And it's actually really it's a lot of fun because Civ is a very long game to play. Even if you're playing very aggressively, it's going to be many hours. So having a multiplayer game of Civ can be filled with a lot of political intrigue, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, me and Santo definitely had our fair share of games on the internet with friends and randos where we had a lot of fun just either secretly teaming up or
secretly plotting against each other.
I remember this one game in particular, which was incredible because I was not doing well. I was surrounded on two sides by two very aggressive players, and then Santa was off on the other side of the map.
Mm-hmm.
And I got blocked in early because I was on a peninsula, and I did not have a very large civilization at all. And I ended up basically becoming a vassal state to one of the players beside me. And I was secretly plotting with the other player beside me, who I was not a vassal to try and take out the player that I was technically a vassal to. And then also I was plotting with Santo. And I was down to like 3 cities, which in Civ is nothing. And it was fairly early game still. I think maybe not even like medieval yet. And so yeah, it might have still been classical, or maybe it was, what's after the classical era again?
I mean, after classical is, I don't remember what it's called. I mean, I refer to it as gunpowder era, personally. But...
Anyway, so, no, medieval's definitely before the gunpowder. Or maybe it isn't.
Oh, right, I guess classical would be, classical's maybe before medieval? Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I lost a good like 10 cities to this other player that I then became a vassal to. And I was plotting, and so I told him I was going to plot with him to take over this other player that was beside me. Except I was also plotting with the other player beside me that I was going to backstab the player that I was a vassal to help him. And then I was also plotting with Santo at the same time. And what ended up happening is that with my tiny 3 cities and a small army, I basically just I played everyone, and Santa was coming in from the east, no west. Santa was coming in from the west side on the larger player. The smaller player, who I was secretly communicating with, went in on the east side and was fighting with the largest player, who I was a vassal to. And then I just like moved my small army in a way that it looked like I was trying to help, but I really wasn't, because I was making bad decisions through terrain that slowed me down a lot, so that my units survived. And then so the largest player on the map is undergoing a pincer strike, while I'm like secretly plotting, and then the armies of the 2 players beside me basically clashed and almost completely destroyed each other, to the point where I was then able to take over most of the territory of both of the players beside me, all at the same time, with the smallest army in the game. Which was just, and it was because I was just like, I was secretly playing everyone against each other in a way that was to my benefit, and it worked. It worked beautifully. Everyone was extremely upset with me.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of, because I ended up with more cities than like everyone else combined, and then everyone else was like, okay, yeah, you win. Yeah, we're done. Fuck this game.
Oh my.
Yeah.
A lot of fun though.
Definitely.
That sounds awesome.
We had a bad habit of starting like 4 or 5 person multiplayer games of Civ at like 8 p.m. Like, oh, it's so bad.
I feel like responsible sieving involves thinking about what time you'll actually be playing it. Like, not on a weeknight.
Yeah. So Civ is the classic problem of, oh, I'll just play one more turn, because a turn doesn't take that long. You know, a single turn, that's only a few minutes, right? What's a few minutes?
Yeah.
So, 10 turns later, oh, it's an hour later. Just one more turn.
Yeah, but I have a Wonder being finished in like 3 turns. Let's wait until that happens.
Oh, yeah.
And then it just keeps going and going. Yeah, the game of Civ 6 I played in prep for this, I got into a war with Sweden. They just declared war on me, and it was just like, okay, all right, fine. But one thing that we haven't talked about yet was in 5 and 6, the city-states, which were a really cool addition.
Oh, yeah, the city-states are super cool.
Yeah, it's basically just like little AI cities that, are in every game that you enable them in, and you can like gain favor with them by doing certain tasks, giving them money, and if you are in good enough standing with them, then they'll help you out in military conflicts. So Sweden got pissed at me for just existing. I hadn't done anything to antagonize them. They declared war on me. I had 3 city-states that I was like buddies with, and they happened to be on the right side, the left side, and the top side of Sweden, and I was on the bottom side. So I didn't even I got into no military combat in that war whatsoever. I just hung back and my city-states just kept Sweden occupied until Sweden eventually wanted to declare peace and also gave me gold for it. That's how badly they were getting their shit kicked in.
Oh,
wow,
that's
Sweden.
funny.
But you know what? They got their revenge though, because as soon as I declared peace, the game crashed.
That's hilarious.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Alright, I'm done with this game.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the city-states are really cool because, it gives you an option too. It takes up some space on the map, but you could take over the city-state and then have an additional city.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, a lot of the bonuses you get if you get to the high favor with those city-states are actually really good.
Sometimes they'll share resources with you, including luxury resources. They'll just give you passive bonuses to random stuff
it might be passive research output or passive gold or passive. Is there a passive production one?
Yeah. Well, so I forget how they worked in Civ 5 if the city-states themselves were specialized. But in Civ 6 they are, to where certain city-states are faith city-states, production, gold, military, science, whatever, culture. So getting friendly with specific city-states, it's also an interesting tactical, political kind of thing that you can do to where you could, go for being friends with certain city-states, and then you have to compete with the other civs to get the most favor.
Yeah.
To
actually, talking about faith-based city-states, I thought that the religion mechanic. So religion's been a mechanic in Civ. I think since Civ 4.
I think so. Yeah.
Since one of the expansions in Civ 4.
Okay. Yeah.
Introduced it.
Yeah, but I feel like Civ 6 really just brought that to another level. Maybe it was just that the interface was better for it, but it's only been in Civ 6 that I ever really felt like it was worth it. Maybe it's because there's so many.
I disagree. Civ 4 religion was broken. If you founded a religion and got a great profit to build the holy monument for whatever religion you were in, you got 1 gold for every city that was of your religion. So if you could spread your religion like wildfire and build this thing, you got such a huge economic building for what I thought was not even that big of a cost.
That's
why I rush Stonehenge every time.
Yeah, there are some abilities Yeah, there are some abilities with the religion in Civ 6 that are like that, where you get gold per city converted.
Same with Civ 5.
And
I think maybe it's just that Civ 6 was the Civ where I finally actually
like gave a shit?
gave a shit about the religion. Because it seemed like a bit more of an... It never seemed like I was getting much value out of the religion mechanic in the previous games.
I feel like
maybe I just didn't use it right.
The religion mechanic definitely was one of those things where it was one of those meta mechanics. So there's a few mechanics in Civ that it feels like if you start to be able to read the room on who else you're playing with, or within the game you can actually through observation see what's going on, that you could get a sense of whether the mechanic is being underexploited or not being exploited at all, and securing your place as the dominant player exploiting that mechanic could run you away and win you the game quite easily. I think religion is definitely one of those that qualifies for that.
Yeah.
And so I found that in the Civ games with AI, they seem to, being, mindless AI players, be able to balance this perfectly. However, playing with people, I always found that there were strategies which players such as yourselves would perhaps kind of dibs the dominance on that. And I would need to find my own strategy, but also not neglect having a position in the ones that you guys were also focusing on. Otherwise, you guys would run away from me. So that was another kind of... It's like the ebb and flow of the group that you're with and the meta game going on, if you're able to observe that.
Yeah. It definitely changed. I didn't... Because... As soon as in Civ 4 they had religion, but faith, I don't even remember if faith was a resource in that the way it was in the other games, because you could buy stuff with faith in 5 and 6, like certain, because you could also customize your religion in 5 and 6 by choosing different tenets, and some of them gave you like unique buildings that you could buy with faith, and I think you could also buy great people with faith. In Civ 5 and 6, and great people can do great things.
Yes, they can.
Just like, I'm just going to get this tech for free. I'm going to, get all this money or have a great general and mess up other people. So...
what was interesting is one of the newer Civ mechanics is actually introducing climate change as a mechanic. And what's interesting is that they... In fact, the design decisions behind that are in a way to educate people, about this topic. And I thought that the mechanics were pretty cool and well done when they introduced climate change. And because it was such
Is this in 6?
Yes.
Or, okay.
The Gathering Storm expansion.
Oh, okay. I haven't actually played that expansion.
And so they had the concept of, there was a lot of cities that are vulnerable to flooding. And so as the game progresses and greenhouse gases are rising, you may discover that those cities have increasing bad weather events. And I don't remember encountering, maybe I only encountered one, but there was also other adverse events that could wreak havoc. There
were droughts, like hurricanes, volcano eruptions. After a certain point in the game, if pollution levels got too high, the actual sea levels would rise. So when you're building a city, it's really funny when you're building, your first city in the ancient days where you don't even know how to make pottery. You can see a warning sign that says, when the sea levels rise for the second time, this building, this city will be underwater. It's like, that's amazing planning for this ancient era settler.
I mean, they know the crops need the river to flood. Why can't the ocean flood?
I think that flavor-wise and perhaps mechanics-wise, it definitely would have been interesting to have those bits of information perhaps locked away for the future that you're not sure which tiles.
Well, part of it is that the Civ, the more recent Civ games have a lot of tooltips to help new players.
Yeah,
and that I think that's important because there are a lot of mechanics to keep track of.
Yeah.
So.
Going back to one of my favorite quote unquote strategies in Civ 5. I always picked Indonesia because of two things. One is that their Civ bonus was they got special, unique luxury resources for every city that you found on a new continent. And the way that Civ 5 determined continents was just like, land masses that are together. So you could have an island that's like literally one tile of sea out from a big landmass, and that would count as another continent for those resources.
Wow.
So you could get some free luxury resources there, and those were especially like huge in Civ 5. But the other thing that they had was, I forget the name of the unit, but their unique unit replaced the swordsman, and it had this like cool like, it's like the freaking Levin sword that Robin has in Fire Emblem and Smash.
The pointy sword.
The jagged blade. And they had a random power that would not reveal itself until they got into combat for the first time. That could either be good or bad.
Oh no.
So they could, have like, they could just have like, better combat potential or heal more or whatever, or they could just be really shitty. So being such a fan of random chance that I would always like rush like ironworking or whatever tech you needed to build swordsmen, build as many of them as I could.
Yes.
And just like send them into the world. Always just like start a super early war just to see what I could get, and then because those upgrades kept after you upgrade the units as well.
Oh, nice.
So depending, you could have some really stupid units. Just a really kooky strategy I liked.
There are always some strangely anachronistic moments where one Civ might be ahead on the tech tree, another might be behind, but you'd have, for example, guys with swords fighting, people with machine guns or tanks, or that's probably a dramatic example, but
I mean, that happens.
It happens, and you'll have these anachronistic battles, and
yes.
Sometimes they can even go unexpectedly, and you'll be like, did that just happen? Did that really? I've had quite a few battles like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're playing against the AIs.
Yep.
Sometimes the AI is really bad at just advancing along the tech tree. I don't know why, but it just is.
I wonder how much additional complexity or design would need to go in Civ before it actually could be used as an analog to model, real world behavior of cities and whatnot. Like Civilization 20, will that...
I mean, I think the problem with something like that is that Civilization is not trying to model real world city growth.
Yeah.
It's trying to be fun to play.
Yeah, like it's only modeling at the basis of things where it's like, okay, you need a certain amount of food and entertainment. And, if you have access to fresh water, that's going to help your growth and stuff like that. But
it's like, oh, yes, the natural sheep that inhabit this plot of land always.
Yes.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Sheep.
Yes, this won't get overfarmed ever.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff in Civ that doesn't necessarily... Also, I mean, with Civ and resources, resource depletion is not a thing at all. But resource depletion is huge in understanding the growth and fall of real-world cities.
Mm-hmm.
There have been many cities where agricultural overexploitation led to like a collapse in farming, for example. Or there's cities that boomed because of like a new mining operation, and then the mine closed, and then now that city's gone. So
yep. Modern ghost towns.
Civ doesn't reflect those realities at all. It doesn't try to, because it would make everything... I think it would make it a very different game.
Yeah, totally. Like, there's like a tiny bit of that where, like, even in Civ 4, there was the concept of global warming, where some tiles late in the game would just turn into desert, and desert was basically unworkable.
Yeah.
But not much more than that in terms of tiles changing. If anything, tiles got better as the game progressed because you would just like find the new strategic resources there. It's like, oh, I really researched the thing that revealed, aluminum on the map. Oh, nice. Now I have this awesome mine hill that I can put a mine on and get a ton of production out of.
Yeah. Yeah, that's still the case, really, with Civ. Your tiles typically get better over time because there are a lot of hidden resources.
Yeah.
At the start of the game.
One of the coolest mechanics in Civ 4 specifically was the hamlets, which were the city improvements that you could build that, it started out as just like one little house and you got some extra gold out of it. And then over time, as you worked that tile, it expanded into a little town that gave you more and more gold. So investing in that early and then building that up over time was like a really cool strategy that you could do that they didn't put any kind of like overtime improvement stuff in any of the other games, I don't think.
Not really. No.
That's interesting.
They always also just like dramatically changed how improvements work. Where in Civ 4, roads didn't cost any upkeep gold, for example. So you literally built roads on every single tile of your empire.
Yep.
the concrete expanse.
Yeah. And then in Civ 5, roads cost gold, so you had to, be careful with building too many of them, which, of course, you might not realize the first time playing that game.
Yeah, build roads everywhere. The road tax.
Roads everywhere. Why is my city broke? Why is my civilization broke?
Damn it! I've invested too much into infrastructure.
Yeah.
This is so unrealistic.
Yeah. Actually, one of the reasons in Civ 6, I think one of my favorite leaders to play was, I can't remember, one of the Roman leaders, because he specifically had a thing about roads that made roads more valuable. And I just really like having roads all around my cities anyway, because it's just so much easier to deal with during like military conflicts or just moving workers around or anything.
That might have been Civ 5. In Civ 6, roads work a bit strangely to where roads get placed by using trade routes. It's very strange.
And then the roads would be automatically generated along kind of the shortest.
Yeah.
And the builders in Civ 6 had a limited amount of builds that they could do, which is also a...
Yeah, I didn't like that so much.
That change was a bit annoying. But, I don't know. It was interesting in some ways because certain things gave you like extra builds, and like the game The Pyramids Wonder, for example, was all about them builders.
Yeah, which is it's got a nice flavor. So.
Yeah, there's some play there.
Yeah.
It also means that you don't run into the situation, especially in Civ 4. One of the other reasons you have roads on literally every tile in your civilization, in your territory in Civ 4, is because your workers would build improvements and then they'd just kind of hang around. And if you have nothing to do with them, you'll just have them auto-build roads.
Yep.
And they put roads everywhere. And that's not really... When your workers are limited in what they can build, you're obviously not just going to build whatever randomly. And then also, you don't have them hanging around when you don't need them, because you have to build them every time you want to improve something.
Yeah. And that's another thing for Civ 6 specifically that emphasize so much, like you really need to care about the tiles around your place.
Again, the Civilization series it's been trending towards a lot more importance on the micro and really managing your cities very very thoughtfully.
Yeah.
And I mean that's a it's a shift. I know a lot of people have not liked the shifts of the recent two games for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not against it. I mean, it's not like Civ 4 is gone. You can go play Civ 4 still.
Yeah.
A lot of people do. I think Civ 4 is still one of the most popular, at least relative to its release date.
Mm-hmm. Civilization. I had some interesting times playing Beyond Earth as well. So I know it was definitely a departure from your usual usual sides of things. But between Civ 5, I think it was, and Civ 6, it definitely... One of the interesting things was the scenarios where they'd give you, almost like Stellaris style, they'd give you, this thing is happening, how do you handle it? And depending on how you handle it, sometimes it could incur the wrath of the flora and fauna, which could sometimes be bad because there were some significantly powerful NPC barbarian creatures waiting to mangle your cities up. And then other times it would just be the philosophy decisions, which actually really they did a good job now that you're describing Alpha Centauri, that that they were able to convey the spirit of that into this successor game. But generally there was 3 kind of major ideas, is that you're going to adapt to the planet, you're going to force the planet to adapt to you, or that you're going to find a middle ground. And what I found was that there was always this interesting dynamic where you'd be put in situations where they're describing a scenario that you'd have to potentially take the L for yourself in the present moment to either fit the kind of theme that you're kind of aiming for, or to just make peace with the locals that are near you. So very cool way of injecting a little bit of flavor in. When you were playing against other people, though, it felt a little bit forced, or kind of like the kind of wild card that detracted from the multiplayer experience a little bit. But otherwise, it was pretty neat.
Speaking of barbarians, there's actually an interesting thing in Civ 6 to where I don't know if they added this later through balance, or if I just didn't realize this checkbox was there, but there's a checkbox to make it so that barbarians have more play with them in 6, to where you can bribe them to do shit, and if you leave them alone for long enough, they'll actually convert themselves into a city-state.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
I haven't actually seen that happen.
Yeah, so that makes me wonder if they added it later, because they've added some some crazy features in Civ 6.
I mean, also I usually just roast the barbarians.
Yeah.
As soon as I find them.
Oh my god, they added one of the craziest features ever back in April. They made it so you could pet the dog.
You can pet the dog?
You can pet the dog.
Oh my god.
I was clicking on my scout, and I'm like, alright, advanced actions, because that's where the auto explorer is, and there was an option there, and what's this? Pet? Click. That's the dog.
That's awesome.
Nice.
That goddamn Twitter account is changing games.
Oh,
yeah. The Can You Pet the Dog Twitter account.
I think they made a battle royale-esque post-apocalyptic game.
Oh yeah, we played that one.
For Alex.
Oh yeah, we played that.
That was fucking stupid.
I think it was originally an April Fool's joke or something.
Yeah.
And then they're like, "Oh, we're just gonna make it."
They decided to take it too far.
Honestly, it wasn't that great.
Yeah.
It was. I give them A for effort of trying something new. Sure, they were hopping on board with the battle royales train. It would have been interesting had it been something fun and successful.
I give them an A for April Fool's joke.
Yeah.
Nothing more. It's not a good game mode. And you know what? I say this as someone who actually has enjoyed some of the stupid mods for Civilization. There was this one mod I played that pretty much turned Civ 4 into a full-fledged action tactical RPG with progression and a sci-fi theme. That it was actually really good. It was a completely different game. It used the Civ 4 engine, but they basically just made a turn-based tactical RPG in a mod using
That's
the game
pretty
engine.
Cool.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've definitely seen some crazy mods for custom civs in Civ 5. I saw a few that were Metal Gear based.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, the giant walkers.
Yeah, so you could play as your leader could be freaking Solid Snake or Big Boss, and really funny stuff.
Outer Haven.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's kind of a nice overview of the Civ series.
Yeah. Did we want to talk about like other 4X games that we played?
We could. Yeah.
Because I haven't really played that many.
I have.
One of the reasons why I haven't played that many is because when I play one, I'm comparing it to Civ the entire time.
Yeah.
Like, Civ is so genre defining for me. Like, I tried playing Endless Legend, because that looked really cool, but I didn't like it. Was even more micro, to where, like, you could, like, outfit your units and, like, completely change squads, and it also had, like, fully controllable, like, combat as well, where when 2 units fought, you would, like, move them around this little mini map. It had some really cool ideas around, like, neutral factions and having a bunch of races that had unique, like, really, really unique play styles, like, very, very differing stuff, but I just never didn't call on for me. And the only other one that I've sunk any amount of time into really is Master of Orion 2.
Ooh,
but that had the same Civ 3 problem where I was way too young and stupid to be playing that game without a manual, so I never figured it out.
Yeah.
I played Stellaris, and I definitely like that game. Stellaris was pretty fun. Just because you could pretty much port in and make it feel flavor accurate all your favorite sci-fi races. You want to make something that's basically the Borg? You can do that. You want to make something that's basically one of those races from the Warhammer 40k universe? You can do that. And the way that they design both the race creator, allowing you to fit them in flavor-wise, and as well, even the unit creator, you could sink hours and hours into the unit creator and basically make make your ultimate sci-fi fantasy dreams come true. And then the battles themselves were quite interesting because they really would, they felt as though you really were the overseer of an empire, and you didn't need to worry too much about the micro stuff. You could take advantage of the micro to really change the tide of a battle, but also just by pure numbers, you can go in there and cause some real damage.
Mm-hmm.
And with Stellaris, there tended to be a lot of cool decisions along the way, which, the only game that has really integrated as much has been Beyond Earth, but, there'd constantly be the results of these random events which you would get through surveying. So you'd be surveying planets, stars, asteroid fields, and it really defined the flavor of who you were as a leader. Are you xenophobically blustering your way through these diplomatic and exploration events, pillaging, murdering, and just taking what you think is yours? Or are you going the diplomatic route? And a lot of the expansions really expand on your ability to dive into that. Now, the one thing that I'll say about that, though, is that the game was just it's constantly changing, and if you were with Stellaris since the beginning until now, you'd be like, yeah, no, it's a completely different game. It is completely different. And that's one game developer who's not afraid to, like, go under the hood and keep ripping parts out of the ship of Theseus until it's no longer the ship of Theseus, and it's something, quite different than what it started out with. But still definitely highly, highly, highly rated.
Yeah. The only other turn-based 4X game that I have much experience with is Galactic Civilizations Iii. Like Civilization, it is of course a 4X game, but as you might guess from the title, it's space-themed. So instead of conquering, a map, you're conquering planets on a sort of galaxy or galactic map. It's a cool game. I liked it, but I honestly couldn't get into it as much as I got into Civ, because Galactic Civilizations 3. So there's a couple things that set it apart. First of all, there are different like different species, right? Different alien civilizations that you play as, and they have very different play styles that work with their abilities, and so each civilization plays very differently, which is actually, that's cool. Like that I like that. And then also, one of the things that Galactic Civilization is kind of known for is that its AI. Its AI is actually really good at the game. Shockingly good, in fact. The AI will be basically making strategic and diplomatic moves in the way that an actual human might, which the AI in Civilization absolutely does not. I don't know how the developers for Galactic Civilizations were able to make like such a good AI, but they did. Unfortunately, that means that if you are not very good at the game, you are going to lose. It is a much harder game in single player than Civilization is. Even if you're playing on the easier difficulties, because like Civilization, it doesn't actually adjust the AI, and in terms of what the AI is programmed to do, it just changes the resource buffs and resource nerfs. And so because of this, if on easy settings, the AI in Galactic Civilizations III is still making very smart moves, even if it's got 50% less resources than you do. And it's good enough that it's actually going to crush new players, in my experience, which is probably why I didn't play it that much, because I just couldn't actually do well at the game. But it's a very deep 4X game, much like Civ, but it's much more focused on diplomacy, I would say, partly because even if you're playing on your own, the AI is actually able to make long-term diplomatic strategies, taking into account what the other civilizations have done to it in terms of like declaring war and expanding near them. And the game feels a lot more vibrant and alive because of this. Even playing against the AI, it feels much more like a game of Civ against other real players, which is great. But like I said, it's a hard game to get into because I found that it was a bit more obtuse than Civilization is in terms of understanding how to interact with the depth of the game. But yeah, it's also really cool. Also, it has cool sci-fi designs, spaceships, alien races, galaxies and stuff. Yeah, the game looks cool. The game looks cool.
That sounds great.
Yeah, it is a bit older now, but
I think I might have gotten it for free.
You probably did
on Epic or something.
Yeah, wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised at all. Yeah. There's a few other. There's also real-time, quote-unquote, real-time 4X games. I think there was one...
Sins of a Solar Empire.
Sins of a Solar Empire is one. Although, I didn't really like Sins of a Solar Empire that much. I couldn't get into it. I don't know what it was.
And then there was the Star Wars equivalent, Empire at War. I really liked Empire at War, and they've come out actually with some great mods for it.
That one was interesting because it literally dropped, like when you had combat on a planet, you would literally drop into like a more traditional RTS style of gameplay.
Yeah.
It actually is interesting now that I think about that, especially when we were talking earlier about another game. But it would be interesting to see a hybrid of the Civ 4 and Civ 5, 6 kind of style of gameplay for the combat, where maybe instead of... Because one of the interesting things about Civ 4 was, that you would basically be... a military engagement was really putting like the economic decisions of how you invested in your military more directly against each other, as opposed to like a more tactical engagement. Whereas the newer Civ 5 and 6 style of combat it's much more of a tactical. It's much more of a tactical thing as opposed to less of a strategic focus. And it might be interesting to see a bit of a hybrid where maybe you have like a battalion, right? And you agglomerate your units into the battalion, so to speak, on the main map, and you send it off to engage in conflict. But then when it actually engages, instead of staying in the traditional Civ map, you drop into like a tactical map, more like something out of a Fire Emblem game or an Advance Wars game, and then fight against the other group of enemies on this sort of smaller map. Might be an interesting way of engaging with a turn-based 4X combat system. It would be different. I don't think I've played any game that does that specifically.
Not turn-based. The Total War Games does that real time.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like sort of the same thing where we were just talking about the that Empire War was basically like that, where like you had the macro 4X view, but then battles were actually like a traditional RTS. And so it would be interesting to see a 4X game that's kind of turn-based, where you have like the 4X view, where you're doing all the normal 4X things, but then the actual combat is played out in a more of a traditional tactical RPG style.
Like I was saying earlier, like Endless Legend did that, but that combined with how like micro everything else in the game was as well, like everything just felt it. The game truly was endless because everything just took freaking forever. So
mostly it's just it occurs to me.
It's a pacing issue.
Yeah, it occurs to me because that is my biggest complaint about the change to Civ 5 and 6. It's just that when you're going to war, the game slows down dramatically, and I don't like the way it impacts the pacing. Being in war in Civ 4 was much less of a change of pace.
Yeah. Speaking of a change of pace, perhaps we pace right out this room and end this podcast.
Sounds like an excellent idea. I think we've covered from A to Z.
We have.
Civilization.
The full annals of history.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I hope you all enjoyed this podcast. We love Civilization. It's a great game series. Absolute classic. Definitely recommend you play one of them.
Yeah, definitely.
Doesn't
At
really
least
matter.
Once.
They're all similar enough that if you like one of them, you'll probably more or less like all of them.
And like the newer Civ games are definitely, they're more beginner friendly than they ever have been.
They are, yeah.
One game we didn't bring up was Civ Rev, Civilization Revolution. I didn't play that, but that was supposed to be like a super beginner friendly console version.
It was weird. I didn't like it.
You know what? Civ it's got the training wheels on, so if that appeals to you, go for it. But if you feel like you enjoy a challenge with your turn-based strategy games, you can definitely dive into some of the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a masochist who wants to discover the depths of your friendships, go find the very simple analog for Civ, Diplomacy. You can play that by email or web online, and it cranks the diplomacy side.
No, diplomacy ruins friendships much more effectively than Civ.
Yeah.
Seriously, I did a play by like Facebook Messenger game of diplomacy right when the pandemic was like starting.
Yeah.
With some friends from school, and oh my, it was a disaster.
I bet.
I was so mad. I was so upset with people because it was one set of orders per day, okay,
Yep.
and every single day was just people trying to screw with each other and get the other players to make bad decisions and goading people over Messenger, and it was fun but absolutely ruthless and infuriating.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I remember I heard about this game first. It was at one of my favorite places to buy board games from in the guy would actually let people play the games in his store, and he said, "This is the one game I'm banning from my store." He's like, "I've never seen people like get their jimmies rustled."
Okay,
Diplomacy can do.
Okay, diplomacy. Calling diplomacy a 4X game is like not quite right, but diplomacy distills the absolute like most simple essence of like the bullshit political intrigue and lying to your opponents to try and goad them into bad decisions. That is the entire game. Yeah. There is nothing else to do in diplomacy except mind games. You know, it's only mind games.
I haven't ever played diplomacy, and I so want to.
You know what? I would strongly consider playing with you guys. I know it'll be a blast. I can see some potential possibilities of how it go, and I bet it would be fun. We should see if we can find a group. Make a group for that. I'd be down.
Oh my god, we could just
this is gonna be the end of the podcast.
We could do a special. We could do a special podcast series of each of us like narrating what happened separately, right, from our own perspectives for each day. That actually might be interesting.
That sounds amazing.
All right,
coming soon to a podcast near you.
Coming soon
right now to a Google Doc.
Yeah, coming soon. The podcast ceases to exist because of a high concept play-by-play diplomacy commentary as we play.
Oh yes,
that's awesome. Well, speaking of other content that we made, we put up a couple more videos on the YouTube. We did 2 different tier lists for the Advanced Wars DS commanding officers. One about how they work in gameplay and mechanically wise, and the other
for the music.
How bumping their tunes are.
Yeah. Spoiler, a lot of the tunes are bumping.
Definitely.
And Nintendo's bringing back the Advanced Wars series, so if the itch to play something strategy Nintendo-wise, you're feeling that, do check out our playlist if you're going to go check out the new Advanced War game that's coming out. Well,
I think we had a reaction video to the Nintendo Direct also on our YouTube channel where you can watch us lose our shit when they announce that game.
Yep.
Definitely. And if you'd like to get into contact with us, you can always email us at angrysunzone@outlook.com or give us a DM on Twitter at angrysunzone, and just let's hang out and talk shop.
Hell yeah.
All right, see you all next time. Hope you all have a great summer.